Welcome to the Retro Chat podcast. My name is Andy Evans, coming to you right here in Weymouth, Dorset. Coming up this week, we're talking all about our top 10 episodes of Star Trek. How you been, guys? You've been good? Had a good week? It's certainly been a busy one for us here at the Retro Chat. We've been really inundated recently with things that have been going on. Some great feedback from some of our shows. So thank you for everyone who's interacted with us across social media and Facebook, especially as Jay and I were talking last week about Destination Star Trek and the cancellation, what was going to happen. We had some great feedback on that. Thank you very much. So this week, as we said, we are talking all about the top 10 episodes of Star Trek. And this is in my opinion, okay? It's based on my 30 odd years of being a Star Trek fan. So what I will say is this: my list might not be right, and it might not be what you guys think it's going to be. And I fully respect that and open to debate. And please let me know what your favourite shows are and what your favourite episodes are across social media. You can go to Facebook at Retro Chat Podcast. You can tweet us at Retro Chat Pod using that hashtag, which is at the bottom of the screen, hashtag back in time. You can email retrochatpodcast@gmail.com. Visit the website where you can listen to all of the archives or watch any of the videos, or you can go to the YouTube channel, Retro Chat Podcast UK, where you're watching this now. And you can obviously watch all of the videos that we've got on the channel. And while you're there, please click and like and subscribe. Hit that bell to get notifications of the latest videos that we are producing across all of the Retro Chat channel, including Vinto's Vault, The Squared Circle, First Thought, Short Bites, whatever it might be, there is going to be a video for someone. Okay, right. So, as we said, our topic of the week this week are the top 10 episodes in Star Trek. And now this is across all of the Star Trek series, from Lower Decks through to Next Generation, through to the original series, through to Deep Space Nine, through to Discovery. Not Strange New Worlds. Now, I haven't included Strange New Worlds in the list, and this is the reason why. Even though Strange New Worlds have had some cracking episodes so far in its first season, it hasn't aired over here in the UK. So made the decision not to include Strange New Worlds into the countdown. All right, let's do it. Let's look at the top episodes. And you know what? Being a Star Trek fan, watching pretty much every season, I've watched every episode of Trek, God knows how many times. It's really interesting for me because it's been so difficult to kind of narrow it down to a top 10. It was so difficult because of the fact that there is just so much good content, and I knew it was going to affect somebody. So what I did was I actually extended the countdown to the top 30. And let's go through the countdown from 30 through to 11. So at number 30 is Past Tense from Deep Space Nine. What a cracking two-part episode in the third season. It was one of those unique ones where it took us back in time and actually is linked so well to that of the Picard second season. Because of the fact it saw poverty, it saw people in desperation, in needs, in shelters being created. And when you look at where we are in the world today, it's really not too far off where we are. God, hopefully we never get, those big shelters or anything like that. But, it might at some point happen. You never know. Coming in at 29 is from the original series. It's Arena, which is known as the battle with Kirk and the Gorn. I can't do the music, but it's a cracking little episode. Introduced us to the lizard sort of crocodile people of the Gorn, which have now been made much more deadly in Enterprise, in the episode of Mirror Darkly, which is also on the list. And in Strange New Worlds, which is tremendous. 28 is again from Deep Space Nine. It's called Little Green Men. It's the fourth season episode. It's all about the Ferengi, Rom, Quark, and Nog. Max Rogenchik, Armin Shimmerman, and Aaron Eisenberg, the late great Aaron Eisenberg, going back in time to 1940s America. Roswell. You can imagine the rest of it. It's a great 45 minutes of comedy, one of my favourite episodes of Deep Space Nine, because it was totally different. Coming up in 27 is the episode Kobayashi Maru from Star Trek Lower Decks. It's not from Lower Decks, it's actually from Star Trek Prodigy. That's my first cock-up of the night. How many more am I going to get? Why have I included Kobayashi Maru from Prodigy, which is a Nickelodeon product? It's aimed at kids. The reason is simply because it featured Renee Auberjonois, Nichelle Nichols, Jimmy Doohan, Gates McFadden, and Leonard Nimoy, all reprising their roles using sound bites for some of the original cast from episodes or movies. Gates McFadden, who played Dr. Beverly Crusher in The Next Generation, actually came back, recorded new material. It was just such a lovely throwback to the old Berman era of Star Trek in the original series. It was lovely to see, and I go back and I watch that one quite often actually, because it is just so cool seeing the ultimate bridge crew together again, you know. And they did such a good job, the animators on this. Absolutely fantastic. Coming in at 26 is again the original series. It's the Galileo 7, a shuttle-based episode. Again, cracking if you've not seen that. 25 was the finale from The Next Generation from Season 7, All Good Things. It was the two-parter episode, the one where Picard is going back, forward, and to the present, thanks to Q and the spatial anomaly. It was a great way of ending that 7-year journey of The Next Generation. And the trial continues right the way through to Picard Season 2. Coming in at 24, again from The Next Generation from Season 7, is Lower Decks, an episode which didn't really feature any of the main cast, and it was all about that crew that you wouldn't normally have any sort of interaction with. 23 was the Voyager finale, Endgame, not to be confused with the Avengers Endgame, but Endgame, where they finally made it home, and we saw future Janeway going to battle with the Borg. Coming in at 22 is Voyager's two-parter Scorpion, which debuted 7 of 9. In 21, it's an Enterprise episode. There aren't many Enterprise episodes in this list. That's not because Enterprise wasn't good. It was more because of the fact that I think it had such a competition, and in 4 years didn't really establish itself the way it should have been. How good, you know, it really should have been on TV. So that's why Enterprise is not really featured. But In a Mirror Darkly is a two-part episode focusing off the original series Mirror Mirror, which we're going to talk about later because that is in the list. And it's really cool to see Archer and the crew playing those evil alternate versions of themselves. This is no transporter accident. We're not going to see the good guys versus the bad guys like we did in Mirror Mirror Mirror. This is set totally in that universe. And it's such a well-run story. It came towards the end of their 4th season, just as we thought it was going to be going into a 5th, with Manny Koto taking over the reins of executive producer and showrunner, who wanted to link it back to the original series. Obviously, that never happened. You can hear more about that in our Enterprise episode or our Star Trek Center Seat episode available in the archives. But, you know, pretty good one nonetheless.
Hey, this is Olympic gold medalist and TNA World Heavyweight Champion Kurt Angle, and you're listening to The Squared Circle. Oh, it's real. It's damn real. And you better be listening, or I'll break your freaking ankle.
Okay, we're back with more of the countdown. That was a little bumper there for The Squared Circle, featuring the WWE Hall of Famer, former TNA World Champion Kurt Angle, the Olympic gold medalist. Coming in at number 20 on our countdown is an episode which established a character played by Jonathan Del Arco that really did transcend the Borg. And that is, of course, Iborg, the character of Hugh. Such a brilliant episode because it dealt with Picard's hatred of the Borg, whether or not they should infect them with a virus that would basically kill them, extermination, if you will, genocide, a whole species genocide. What would they do? Tremendously written, tremendously acted. It was really good to see the main bridge characters interacting with Hugh and seeing that prejudice, that breakdown just slowly disappear. I really enjoy this episode from season 5 of The Next Generation. Coming in at 19 is the finale of Deep Space Nine, What You Leave Behind, the 2-part finale. Well, I say 2-part finale because really this was the final part of a 6-episode ending saga. The Dominion War was coming to a conclusion. We were going to find out who was going to win the battle. We weren't sure if it was going to be the Federation or the Dominion. We knew the Federation had taken Deep Space Nine back over again. We knew Gul Dukat was after the Pathrace. Brilliant. You know, we knew Garrick was part of the New Order with Kira on Cardassia Prime, trying to take back. Wayoon was involved. The Founder was involved. And in the end, we saw where the guys were going to go. Odo went back to the Founder's Changeling's homeworld. You know, Miles went back to Earth. Sisko did the ultimate sacrifice and went, as per his destiny, into the wormhole to be with the prophets. Tremendous episode. If you haven't seen it, check it out. In fact, check all of DS9 out from season 5 onwards, because season 5 really is when the Dominion War kind of kicked in and they changed angles. But Deep Space Nine developed itself into such a tremendous show that it's really hard to rival it. I think it's actually the best Star Trek show out there. Big thing to say, and I'm a huge fan of Deep Space Nine. Coming in at 18 is from season 1 of Deep Space Nine, and that is called Duet. Features a very powerful episode with Kira facing her demons from a Cardassian Slayer. Very much worth watching that episode. Coming in at 17, we're continuing with DS9. Look at this, 4 episodes, because the next one's going to be DS9 as well. Homefront, Paradise Lost. The 2-part episode set in San Francisco, set on Earth, where Sisko and Odo travel back from Deep Space Nine because there's been a changeling found on Earth. And we see the prejudice starting to set in from Starfleet Command in terms of wanting to take the Founders out and the changelings out. Brilliant 2-part episode dealing with terrorism, racism, discrimination. Not what you would expect from a Star Trek episode, but just amazing to watch the acting. Coming in at 16 is the season 4 opener for Deep Space Nine, Way of the Warrior, which debuted on Deep Space Nine the character of Worf, played by Michael Dorn, of course, from The Next Generation. Worf would be coming over to DS9, continuing on for the rest of that series, continuing that character that he had of Worf, getting into relationships with Dax, Sisko, etc., etc. And also seeing much more, I think, of character development from Worf than what you saw throughout the entire 7 years in the feature films on The Next Generation. So Way of the Warrior coming in at number 16 there. Number 15 is going back to season 2 of Next Generation, and that's Q Hugh. The episode where Q snaps his fingers and sends us to meet the Borg in the Delta Quadrant. Coming up next is Relics, the season 6 episode from The Next Generation, featuring Captain Montgomery Scott. He's been found on the USS Jenolan from the original 23rd century and is now trying to acclimatize and adjust to life in the 24th. Amazing episode, and the last appearance of Jimmy Doohan in Star Trek. Coming up in 12th place is Space Seed from the original series. We've done an episode featuring all about this episode in our archives. This is from season 1, which introduced us to Ricardo Montalban and the psychotic Khan Noonien Singh, a character that would have some sort of a foundation in Star Trek going forward right the way through to Enterprise and now in Strange New Worlds. Coming up at number 11 is from season 5 from The Next Generation, and it's called The Inner Light. Why is this one here? Because some people will say this episode of The Next Generation wasn't fantastic. It wasn't the best. But I argue that because this one's got a real personal connection to me, because it was my father's favourite episode of Trek. And the flute piece of music that they played, we actually played at my dad's funeral when he passed away in 2008. So it always holds a very memorable part and a memorable place in Star Trek lore for me. That being said, it's not in the top 10, but the story was well written. The acting was amazing by Patrick Stewart, seeing that development of that character from what is really only a few seconds in real life, but a whole lifetime that he's going through. Seeing his relationship, seeing him understand what actually happened. It's just a tremendous, tremendous episode. Well, that leads us in to the top 10. So what came in at number 10? Let's find out. Coming in at number 10 on our countdown is from Deep Space Nine. It's in the Pale Moonlight. So, as we said before, DS9 really allowed the franchise to explore the darker, grittier side of Starfleet. And it was more evident, no clearer way than this episode, because it features a morally bankrupt Ben Sisko. He endeavours to bring the most hated enemies of the Federation, the Romulans, into an alliance to win the Dominion War. And in doing so, has to make an ally of a Cardassian spy, a prison convict, and some other duplicitous characters to finally accomplish his goal. Sisko sacrifices his idealism in exchange for a shot at triumph over the Dominion. He's willing to do whatever it takes to convince the Romulans, even going against every principle that he stands for in respect of Starfleet. It's a deep character study and a psychological thriller as Garrett's machinations unfold in the background. Tremendous. This is when you knew DS9 was different. This is when you knew this show had finally reached its own pinnacle. It was just amazing. Absolutely tremendous. Coming in at number 9, we go back to the original series of Star Trek and we look at Balance of Terror, which again features the Romulans, because it was a white knuckle episode focusing on prejudice and hatred of the others. Kirk and the crew of the Enterprise take on the Romulans in a monumental showdown involving strategy, cunning, and also knowing one's enemy. Kirk is stretched to his limit against a faceless enemy. At the end of the episode, when the Enterprise has almost lost and the Romulans finally reveal themselves, Jim Kirk is shocked to see that they resemble the Vulcans. They look like Mr. Spock because they share a common ancestry. In doing so, it forces the crew to come to terms with their own xenophobia, and they admit that there are aspects of the Romulans that they can respect, such as the captain of the Romulan ship, who was played by Mark Leonard, who not long after that would go on to play Sarek, the father of Spock, in not only the original series but the movies and within The Next Generation. Of course, Mark Sarek no longer with us. Balance of Terror is just a tremendously well written, well acted, well produced episode. And when you think back to the 1960s, when you think back to what was going on in the world, the Martin Luther King movement, the war in Vietnam, this was so powerful. And it's a wonder it didn't get a lot of criticism, but it was Brilliantly done, as I said. Absolutely beautifully acted. We're going to stick with the original series, and this time we are going to move to the city on the edge of forever. An episode written by award-winning sci-fi writer Harlan Ellison. It's one of the most moving episodes in any of the Star Trek franchises, because Kirk is faced with a dilemma that questions his moral convictions and his commitment to Starfleet. You see, Dr. McCoy suffers an overdose of the drug cordrazine. He then travels back in time to Earth in the 1930s and unwittingly changes the course of history. On the mission to save McCoy, Kirk encounters a woman named Edith Keeler, who's played by Joan Collins. She will become internationally famous for a pacifist movement that prevents President Roosevelt from entering World War II, allowing Adolf Hitler to develop the atomic bomb and use it to control the world. In the correct timeline, she's supposed to die, but Kirk falls in love with her. If he lets her live, the Federation and Starfleet will never exist, and millions will die. But if he lets her die, then the love of his life goes with him. Again, William Shatner sometimes gets criticised for overhamming certain things about production in terms of his delivery, in terms of his portrayal. But I don't think you can say that about this one. He was tremendous. Joan Collins was tremendous. The little comedy moments with Spock and the ears showing, it was just beautiful. Now, Harlan Ellison doesn't like this episode. He never liked it. But it goes down as one of the fans' most favourite episodes, ranking high in majority of top lists, hence why it's in the top 10 for us here at Retro Chat. Coming up in 7, well, we're going back to Deep Space Nine, and this time it's Far Beyond the Stars. We've talked about this episode on Retro Chat before. We did a whole episode detailing it. I've gone on record to say that this is one of the most beautifully directed by Avery Brooks, acted, performed, written, morally justifiable episodes ever. Far Beyond the Stars dealt with a situation that really should never have happened. The racism that was going on in the 1950s. And it really comes about because Sisko has a breakdown. He's seeing his friends die in the Dominion War. And he's emotionally fragile and he collapses. He starts seeing this vision of someone who looks just like him, called Benny Russell. And Benny Russell is a 1950s sci-fi writer from New York. And this episode really is a tour de force by Avery Brooks, who not only starred as Ben Sisko, lead character, but directed it. And it deals with the racism of the time, the race in the 1950s. We're basically given the suggestion that the events of DS9 and ultimately that of the entire franchise are from the mind of Benny Russell. So basically it's a story inside a story. We also get to see an episode where nobody is wearing makeup. So we see Rene Auberjonois out of Odo. We see Armin Shimmerman. We see Michael Dorn for the first time not wearing the Worf makeup. There is a scene where Benny Russell, has a full-on breakdown. And it's so powerful that I've delivered mental health training sessions and I've played that clip to resonate what anxiety, stress, depression can do to somebody. Beautiful. Check it out in our archives. The next episode in the list, number 6, we are moving to Voyager. And it's the two-parter called Year of Hell. And really, this is what Voyager could and should have been a gritty 2-part adventure that follows the Starship Voyager over the course of a year, where it's constantly fighting for survival and it's barely being held together. Unfortunately, though, and disappointingly, I think, for the cast and for the fans, it all gets reset at the end. But it is an incredibly dark journey, and it features a delightfully villainous Kurtwood Smith as the main antagonist, Anorax. Well worth watching, because it is just, again, Kate Mulgrew showcasing what Kate Mulgrew can do. Absolutely tremendous. Number 5 in our countdown, we're actually going quite recent and moving to Star Trek Discovery. And this is called the episode called Through the Valley of Shadows. And this one is in here because it was very cleverly done. It featured, as you can see, Anson Mount portraying Captain Christopher Pike, who joined the Discovery crew at the beginning of season 2 and obviously now leads the crew of the Enterprise at Strange New Worlds. Realizing his fate, seeing what is going to happen down the line in an episode or something that we already know, and that is, of course, the accident. At the beginning of this episode, it featured clips from the original Star Trek pilot, The Cage. Showcased the Talosians. It was just, incredible. At the end of this action-packed episode, the episode solidified the firm convictions of Captain Pike, as well as delivered world building that the Klingons that we hadn't seen in any Star Trek series before. Pike travels to Borath in search of the sacred time crystal, which will help illuminate the signals of the Red Angel, and is forced into a hallmark moral conundrum like only Star Trek can do. If he takes the time crystal, he will be shown his fate, which is there made unavoidable. But if he doesn't, he has a chance to alter it without helping his crew. So it's that moral conviction, isn't it, of do I look after oneself or do I look after the greater good? And, knowing Christopher Pike, he took the greater good option, and he saw himself in the accident. He saw himself in the wheelchair, and that's playing on his mind, not only throughout the rest of Discovery Season 2, but now in Season 1 of Strange New World, we're getting that flashback. We're understanding more about what's going through the mind of Captain Pike. The top 5 is really coming together now, because now we're going back to The Next Generation and the 2-part Season 5 episode called Unification. And this is where Leonard Nimoy's Spock comes to The Next Generation in really what was a tie-in to Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. The plot is about Spock's political attempts to reunite the Vulcan and the Romulan people. It's a fine episode on the whole, but the joy really does come from watching Leonard interact with Patrick Stewart. It's, in a word, fascinating. You might have just heard my front door go there. There we go. This is live radio at this moment in time. Next up, it's yesterday's Enterprise from season 3, of the Next Generation, because this one is known as being one of the greatest Trek episodes of all time. In fact, it's known as being one of the top 5 Next Generation greatest episodes. Why is that? Because basically we're seeing the Federation get its ass kicked by the Klingons in a time-altered universe. And Picard must figure out what to do with the Starship Enterprise NCC 1701C, which has come through a spatial anomaly and changed the course of galactic history. We see Tasha Yar back on the bridge. Worf is gone. We're at war with the Klingons. This episode, alongside that of Chain of Command, is about as gritty as the Next Gen ever got, and as a result of that, is absolutely hugely enjoyable. We got 2 episodes to go in our countdown. Next up is Mirror Mirror from the original series, the debut of this alternate universe We talked about it in A Mirror Darkly. We've seen it a few times in Deep Space Nine. We saw it in Enterprise as well. But Kirk, McCoy, Scotty, and Uhura find themselves in a parallel, more savage universe where the Federation is known as the Empire and is feared like that of the Klingons. Spock wears out this goatee of evil, and it's really cool to see the good guys mixed with the bad guys and what they need to do in order to succeed. So what is number one in our Retro Chat countdown of the top Star Trek episodes? Is it going to be from The Next Generation? Will it be from Prodigy? Will it be from Lower Decks, Discovery, Enterprise, the original series, DS9? Well, I can tell you, it's the best of both worlds. The best of both worlds from Season 3, the ending of Season 3, beginning of Season 4, is possibly the greatest two-parter in history of Star Trek. Because it features some of the most complex and dramatic episodes of TNG. The Borg represented a culture that there is no possibility of understanding, and that resistance to his embodiment is of blind ignorance is futile. And the crew of the Enterprise perseveres against the Borg despite its best efforts to persecute Federation space. They take the risk to try to understand the Borg on its own terms, challenge the concept of diplomatic communication that The Next Generation is based on, even at a great cost to themselves when Picard is taken captive and assimilated. We've talked about this again in our archives. Check it out. We'll put a link to the episode, both audio and video, in the comments on the podcast and the video feed. So that is it. That is our countdown of the greatest Star Trek episodes in our history. But what do you think about it? Do you agree or do you not? Let me know at Facebook Retro Chat Podcast. Tweet me Retro Chat Pod using the hashtag #BackInTime, or visit the website, or leave a comment on this video right now. All right, just before we wrap up, let's bring you some news from the world of retro. We're going to kick off this week with news on Miss Marvel, the new Disney Plus show that dropped earlier this week as we record. And we're talking about whether or not a second season could actually happen. Miss Marvel boss Bisha K. Ali addressed whether or not Marvel Studios is expected to greenlight a second season of the Disney Plus series. Ali, who is the head writer and the creator of Miss Marvel, opened up about a potential season 2 in an interview with Deadline. He said, "I'll let you know if they call me. Let's see how the show does before you ask me about season 2. As with the majority of the non-Loki entries in Marvel's lineup of shows on Disney Plus, Ms. Marvel at this time has not been confirmed for a second season, although a crew member did let the potential of more seasons slip in March. Even if there aren't any future seasons in the works, it doesn't mean that this is the last that the audience will see of Kamala Khan. The 19-year-old actress will be returning for the upcoming Captain Marvel sequel, which recently wrapped filming, called The Marvels." Ali noted how The Marvels impacted the production of Miss Marvel and its potential for more seasons. He goes on to say, the thing is, the show is, as far as I knew when we started that, Kamala was going to end up in The Marvels. I didn't know what was going to happen in that movie because they didn't tell me, because I'm a little chatterbox. But I knew that's what we were building to. That she had to be ready by the end of our show to go and do whatever it is that's going to happen in the Marvels, and what her future in the MCU after that. Based on the comic book series of the same name, Miss Marvel stars Vellani as the titular teenage hero, a Captain Marvel superfan. Despite a portion of viewers resorting to review bombing the series, Ms. Marvel has received plenty of high praise from both critics and fans alike. Vellani's performance has been particularly acclaimed by many, including the Nobel Prize laureate Malala Yousafzai, who said, "It's not every day that I turn on the TV and find a character who eats the same foods, listens to the same music, or uses the same Urdu phrases as me. She said in a letter to Marvel Studios, "What a joy to see Miss Marvel reflect the lives of a Pakistani immigrant family and reveal a young superhero whose powers connect to her heritage. Thank you, Marvel and Disney Plus, and most importantly, Miss Marvel." Keeping with Disney Plus, the Disney Plus miniseries Obi-Wan Kenobi revisits a major location from Respawn's beloved video game Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. In the most recent episode of Episode 4, Obi-Wan Kenobi gave fans their first look at the live-action version of the Fortress Inquisitorius, which served as the headquarters of the Inquisitors. Obi-Wan infiltrated the fortress in search of Leia Organa, who had previously been taken by the Third Sister for interrogation regarding the location of Force-sensitive refugees. Gamers might also recognise Fortress Inquisitorius as the final location in Star Wars Fallen Order's campaign, where game's protagonist Cal Kestis storms the fort in search of a holocron containing a list of Force-sensitive children. The fortress was heavily fortified Imperial stronghold built on the water moon Nur, located in the Mustafa system outside the Outer Rim territories. It was the Inquisitors' main headquarters. The fortress was where many surviving Jedi were taken to be tortured and executed, and it also features several security measures such as laser gates and the labyrinthine network of bridges. Notably, both Obi-Wan and Cal infiltrated the fortress by swimming through the structure's underwater tunnels. Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy previously explained how Fallen Order and other video games helped shape modern Star Wars stories. They said, "It's funny, the more I've got to know how games are written and that kind of persistent storytelling that goes on in a game environment where you're just constantly building up upon a single story, that's much closer to what Star Wars is. There's intention around bringing in elements from the games because there's a huge investment by people in Star Wars along the way." The Lucasfilm head may soon have even more Star Wars games to explore, as Fallen Order's sequel, Star Wars Jedi Survivor, is set to launch on next-gen consoles sometimes in 2023. Alright, that's the news for the week. Coming up next week on the Retro Chat podcast, we are going to be talking all about the cartoon series The Silverhawks by Rankin Bass, the sequel to the Thundercats. So we're going to be talking about that in more detail. What a show we've had this week. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you for being a part of the Retro Chat podcast. Stay tuned to both the podcast feed and the YouTube channel, because we will be dropping at some point over the next 10 days a special one-off Squared Circle on ECW One Night Stand that took place in 2005. It of course was 15 years since that show aired. And let me know what you thought of ECW One Night Stand. Let me know what you think of the Silverhawks. Let me know what you think of the news that we've touched on so far, and of course our top 10 countdown list, by going to social media. Facebook, Retro Chat Podcast. You can tweet us at Retro Chat Pod using the hashtag Back in Time. Email retrochatpodcast@gmail.com, and you can also visit the website retrochat.co.uk and the YouTube channel Retro Chat Podcast UK. If you would like to listen to the audio version of the podcast and you're watching this on YouTube, the links will be in the comments. Just click and subscribe. If you'd like to watch the video and you're listening on the audio, same thing applies. The link will be in the narrative. Just click, subscribe, and hit the bell. One other thing to mention, coming up on July 20th at 8 p.m. is Quiz Night Live 3, which is the Julia House rematch. We're going to be raising money for the amazing Julia's House charity that looks after children and their families in terminal hospice care. It's going to be 5 rounds of entertainment, 50 questions, 5 rounds, live, July 20th at 8 p.m. I hope you can join me for that. That's it for this week. I'll be back next week with more of the Retro Chat podcast. Again, just to remind you, our topic will be on the Silverhawks. They're partly metal, they're partly real, but it's a cracking cartoon. I will see you next week. Until then, for all of us here at the Retro Chat podcast, Take care. See you soon. Bye-bye.